All right, now we're going to have two short presentations corresponding to ISWC briefs. The first one is entitled Challenges in Using Skin Conductance Responses for Assessments of Information Worker Productivity.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anam Ahmed, a recent graduate from Georgia Tech. And today, I would like to share the challenges I faced in trying to use skin conductance responses for assessments of information worker productivity. My hope is, with this short talk, to encourage you to read my paper. Imagine you've been working on your ISWC paper all evening, and you've been struggling to condense your related work section into one column. At this point, you're probably reading the same lines over and over, and you get this pop-up. So your computer's out of juice, but what about you? Instead of trying to force words, grabbing a glass of water, or even focusing your attention on another section of the paper might give you the mental reset you need. Well-timed breaks can open new doors to solutions and help us reduce the number of impasses overall. But when should you take this break? We may defer this to productivity tools like the Pomodoro timer that you see here, where the premise is that you take a break every 25 minutes. But what if your task does not neatly fit into these 25-minute sections? So instead of using breaks, taking breaks at fixed time intervals, can we leverage our context? Now, studies show that taking short breaks in moments of fatigue, boredom, or frustration can be beneficial. And these can be measured as affective states. I mean, they may be indicating that you're getting disengaged. Now, the star of our show, electrodermal activity, has been widely accepted as a good biomarker for high-stress situations or being under threat or even the onset of seizures. But it has also found use in more subtle scenarios like assessing engagement in a classroom setting or even dyadic interactions between parent and child. So we wanted to see if it can pick up on these subtle changes and work for us too. So we designed an experiment where we had participants produce as many 4-letter words from a 9-letter anagram. And in the first phase, they only worked on one such anagram. So they had suggested time constraints. And in the second phase, they worked on 2 such anagrams. And they may have chosen to switch back and forth. But if they made this choice, they did this autonomously. Now, in the first iteration with 20 participants, we used a wrist-based sensor. But in the second iteration, we used a toe-based sensor. Stay tuned for the reasons why. Now, defining productivity is challenging, but to operationalize it for our context, we considered it as non-zero word count, but unproductive as sustained inactivity. Now, I say sustained because we wanted to account for periods where they might be thinking of some words and suddenly get ideas. So we defined these 7 conditions based on what was happening in consecutive time windows and whether there were switches. Pretty standard pipeline where we took raw EDA, pre-processed it, extracted some knowledge-based features. But before classifying, we did a statistical evaluation to see if the values for some features, if not all, were statistically significant between productive and non-productive windows. And then did the random forest classification and obtained the F1 scores. Now, we ensured we got the best signal possible and used features that had found success in related work. But surprisingly, our results weren't very good. Now, I would like to share some of these insights, chief being the wrist sensor iteration had 17 out of 20 participants exhibiting a flat EDA signal, which was consistently below the reference range. This is why we moved to the foot-based sensor, because we found evidence from studies in other fields which had done systematic evaluations of different on-body locations. Now, finger's the best, but I wanted them to type, so I moved to the foot. Even so, the F1 score averaged across all participants was pretty low. And granted, our data was imbalanced, but even the most frequently occurring condition had a very low average F1 score. Now, I understand that a 7-class classification task is challenging, but even collapsing it into a binary classification did not offer much improvements in performance. I mean, for the results as well as the experiment setup, we had several reflections, but the most important one was this. Gone. Oh. 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 1 second. This is where animations. Yep, the final one, that EDA is noisy and the guidelines exist even for ambulatory settings, but it may be time to look beyond the wrist as well as achieve consensus for valid ranges, especially for subtle scenarios. Thank you. And that's it. I have the Whova link for my talk for any lingering questions, and yeah, happy to engage anyone's now.
Task not engaging enough or not compelling enough?
So the task definitely, so the affect that I enlisted, boredom, frustration, and fatigue, it definitely wasn't challenging enough to frustrate them, but boredom was one of the emotions experienced, and I had a post-study metacognitive questionnaire for this evidence. So yes, I agree the task wasn't challenging enough to do this, but we have proof for EDA working in more stressful scenarios anyway, so I wanted to ensure that it is subtle enough so that it can accurately or even artificially represent daily information work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, I need to play sound through the speaker.